Thanks for having me. This is a bit of deja vu. I have actually spoken here before. Who hasn't heard me speak? Oh, great. Or maybe I'll say more than I'd planned. I might use the book so I remember what I'm going to say. It's going to help me. What I had told Jewel I was going to talk about today was a bit of an update on how the CCC Inquiry into council corruption is going in Queensland. Has anyone been following how that's going? You're following Ipswich. So it's really interesting. Just as a bit of a background, I was an expert witness at the CCC Inquiry during their public hearings last year. Having written the book and been involved with community groups trying to expose corruption and favouritism in councils. Since that time, the CCC has invited me to speak to the Australasian Anti-Corruption Conference in Sydney, and I addressed all the corruption bodies across Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific about grey corruption and political favouritism and what we should be doing to stop it. So I've been intimately involved. As a bit of an update of how that inquiry into council corruption is going, some of you might be frustrated at how slow it's going, but in Ipswich, 12 people are already facing 66 charges from the council. Mayor Paul Pasali, in my view, was essentially running a protection racket, but we will certainly find out. He's been accused of official corruption, fraud and misconduct in public office and perjury. That's all. Carl Wolf, a former CEO, has been involved in many of those same actions. I'm not 100% sure on the charges, and a former Chief Operating Officer, Craig Maudsley, is also involved. At the Fraser Coast, Mayor Chris Loff was sacked in February for misconduct. Now this one's actually a little bit more interesting. I'm not sure if you followed this, but he's been charged with disclosing state secrets of all things. But I have it on good authority that his intentions were to expose state wrongdoings, not state secrets, and the fact that he's been dragged through the courts trying to defend his name is quite indicative of how secretive some of these councils can be and like to be. In Logan, Mayor Luke Smith has been charged with official corruption and misleading the corruption watchdog. One of the problems there, he created a company, Logan Futures, for an artificial separation between him and his financial backers and reduced the transparency of his nearly $400,000 record donations for a council mayoral campaign. He allegedly received a powerboat from a donor, a Sea Ray 240 sun deck. Does anyone know what that looks like? It's like a big jet boat that, all the pretty girls lays on the benches out the front. You tow some water skiers around. You've got to have a Sea Ray 240 sun deck. Any good mayor should have one, and his property developer mates should look after him. A councillor there, Stacey McIntosh, is also up on a stealing charge. And what I found really interesting is when I was at the CCC Inquiry, one of the donors to Luke Smith was on the witness stand there at the public hearing, and he'd donated $30,000 to the election campaign, and the QC was trying to unpick how this donation occurred, and he said, well, we went out to dinner and I bought him dinner, and then I just gave him $30,000. And the QC's like, so, did you write a check? Did you go to the ATM machine? He's like, no, I had $30,000 in my pocket. We just worked out before, $30,000 is a pretty big brick of money to just have. So what's the QC ask next? Did you ask for it? No, sorry, on the witness stand, what did he ask the donor? Did you ask for a receipt? Because that's what you do when you get a great big wad of cash on the sly. He goes, no, it's not that type of transaction. This is what the guy says at the CCC. Go look up the video. And the QC is just standing there not knowing what to say next, right? Maybe he, running for mayor, should have thought about that as well before taking it and running away. And of course, he didn't remember when he'd recorded that as a donation, some point in the future. He relied on his memory for all $377,423 of donations and declared them months later. Now, it seems pretty fast and loose with the electoral laws, if you ask me. I've missed many people that are getting caught up, but I guess the point of going through them is to give you an idea of that old saying, power corrupts. Okay? Councils in Queensland have grown quite large, quite powerful. They have big budgets, they make big decisions, they create many winners and losers. They make planning decisions worth billions every year. Okay? And with that power comes the incentive of others to seduce you and get you to use your power for their favour. And that's actually what this book is about, what I call grey corruption. It's about shifting the hand of government to provide favours and highly valuable gifts for certain parties. And what I call them grey gifts, these political decisions about the distribution of wealth from others. You create winners in the community and losers in the community, and you give out these favours at no cost to yourself. They're not like birthday presents. It's not a gift where I incur the cost and you get the benefit. It's a grey gift where I decide who gets the gift and also who else incurs the cost. It's great. So a lot of examples in councils. A lot of this inquiry revolves around property developers because the council's decisions around what type of use different pieces of land can be put are worth millions of dollars. So if we take, for example, out at Ipswich, we've got Springfield. So Maha Sinnathambe bought that plot of land in 1992 when no one wanted it for $7 million. Okay? In 1997, got an act of Queensland Parliament to say you can build whatever you want on it now, thanks very much. Got some roads built, got 2 train stations and a 4-lane highway built into the middle of this piece of land. So Sinnathambe and the Springfield Land Corporation still own half of it. What do you think it's worth, just the remaining half right now? $1 billion.
Oh my God.
1,000 million. So his $7 million is converted to A, everything he's made by selling off half, plus B, the spare $1 billion in the back pocket. And almost all of this came about through decisions not only of the Ipswich Council to build roads to that plot of land in preference to elsewhere, but of the state decisions to also give extraordinary planning benefits and powers to the corporation itself. Now you've got to imagine this type of decision happening all across Queensland, all across the country all the time. Now, one of the solutions to grey gifts is, that I talk about in the book is, well, you should just charge for them. Okay? You shouldn't be in the business of giving away things that are worth value to the private individuals. You should be selling things that are worth something to private individuals. You wouldn't let a council just give away plots of land to their mates who are property developers, but by giving away new development rights to them, it's essentially the same thing. They're just giving away bundles of property rights for free and no one's asking them to sell them. If it was a piece of land, you'd expect them to auction at market price and get the benefits, right? Now you can actually do that because in Sao Paulo in Brazil, it's done. It's been done for 10 years in one city and they've raised $5 billion in 10 years in one city by auctioning the rights to additional density rather than giving them away for free. In the ACT, they don't auction it, but they charge a tax of 75% of the value. Okay? And they raised $185 million in 2014-15. If you scale that up to the rest of the country, it's around $11 billion per year. And that's predominantly decisions made by councils around who gets to build what on what piece of land. So when you've got that $11 billion honeypot up for grabs, you can imagine that councillors are the target of a lot of attempted seduction, let's just call it, by people who just carry $30,000 around out for dinner like all normal people do. So that's the grey gift. One of the problems with tackling the type of favouritism that goes on by dishing out these type of favours is that typically it's not a one-to-one transaction that goes on. It's typically not, here's $30,000, rezone my piece of land. It's typically, we go to school together, I employ your spouse or your sister-in-law, I lend you the beach house, and then somebody else is on the board of the same company, and I look after you, you look after my mate looks after me, and we have this little network of indirect reciprocity is what economists call it. Because it's very easy if I give you money and then you make a political decision in my favour the next week, right? It's very, very easy to catch. But if I just give out money to people I like and who are in my group, and when they get the chance, they give out money to people they like, and they're in the same group, then eventually that group together steals from everybody else. Okay? So for a game of mates, what you really need is a nice group that's identifiable, that signals well to each other. And what I mean is when you're giving out these favours, you want to know who's in your group and who will reciprocate and who's not in your group and will go, hey, that guy's giving out favours. We should stop that. Okay, so you've also got to join the right clubs, go to the right schools, say the right things, wear the right things, join the right... I know there's golf clubs in Sydney where you go to tell everyone you want to play. And the interesting thing about political donations that I found is that donations aren't a bribe. They're not this one-to-one, oh, here's $10,000, can you give me a $10 million political decision? That doesn't make sense. I wouldn't be giving out $10 million political decisions for 10 grand. Maybe it's because I'm an economist, but I'm not, I'd ask for more. That 10 grand is just a signal that says, hey, I want to be in your group. I'm going to donate to you, I'm going to donate to you, and I'm going to donate to you, and I'm going to do it next year, and I'm going to do it next year. And what I'm going to do is say, hey, we're all in the same group together. Look at how I'm sharing my money around when I get the chance. When you get the chance, share your money back with me or share your political favours back with me. So what I find really interesting is that most of the big political donors in Australia aren't the ones getting the most political favours. So I went through almost 20 years of political donations data. I had to go to level 5 on Margaret Street and get a bunch of ring binders off the shelf and scan them in and type them into the computer to get all the historical donations data. And what's really interesting is the biggest donors are typically the new kids on the block. So who are the biggest political donors in Australia right now? Does anyone know? Chinese. Is that because they're getting the most favours? Yeah. Not yet. Is the answer, okay? There's a racket going on. Don't think the Chinese are inventing it or bringing it here. They're trying to join in. They're trying to pay the entry fee to join in. That's why they're the biggest donors. There's actually a really interesting idea in sociology. They call it mutual dirt. It's even better if you donate, that's one thing, and you issue receipts and it's all above board. It's even better if you do a small crime together. This is how the mafia gets you sucked in. If you stay in my beach house, and I probably should declare it, but I don't, you both know it's a bit iffy. That's a little bit of something, that you could have on each other, if your loyalty was questioned. And you do a bit of that over time. You build up this loyalty of the group. The last thing you need for a game of mates and to keep this trade in favours going is you need to spread myths about why what you're doing for your mates happens to be good for everybody else. Okay? Oh, if I didn't give my mate this $10 million planning decision, we wouldn't get any housing built. Okay? You know that's a myth because that mate isn't obliged to build any housing. You can flog the land to the next guy tomorrow and just cash in on the 10 million. If you wanted housing built, A, you could build it, or B, when you give them that planning decision, you can force them to actually do it. Rather than just say, do it if you want, or if you don't, whatever, take the money. Okay? It's quite clearly a myth that's been spread by vested interest, but it's very easy to believe until you really scrutinise it. So that happens all around. Anyway, that's mainly what the book's about. So now that we've had a little bit of background, I guess I want to go through some do's and don'ts. I don't want to spend too long. How do you change things then? This is a really sort of insidious human coordination that's going on here. How do you change things? Well, let's maybe start with the don'ts. You don't start by saying, we need better people. I know it's tempting to do. Oh, if only we had better people. I don't think people are better or worse than others. I think in the same environment, people mostly react in the same way. So what you're doing is you're sending someone who you think is going to do their best into an environment, a social environment that's going to have all these pressures coming from all different sides, and they're going to react in a pretty predictable way, regardless. Okay, so don't think you're just going to solve it. If only we had our hero, that's the person. It's if only it was so easy. Don't focus on donations. If your ambition is to be as corrupt as New South Wales, then you can ban political donations from property developers. If that's how high you want to aim, go for it. Okay, but this is a very, very small part of the game that's going on here. Okay, it's much better to make councillors less attractive targets for bribery and seduction by not letting them give away things for free. It's a bit like if a council had a contract to build a road, we expect them to go through some kind of competitive process, right? We don't just let them give it to their brother's construction company every time at whatever price. But a lot of the decisions we have are, in effect, when you strip out all the stories we've told, just pure economic gifts to the person receiving that decision. So you want to charge for it, you want to make councillors less attractive. And another way to make politicians less attractive targets is to just not let them make the decision. Okay? What if we had a lottery system to allocate new areas for development? What if we had a lottery system to appoint senior people to government boards where they're right now very overpaid? I don't know if you've been following the Australia Post situation, but those type of overpaid positions in statutory bodies and in companies that are, rely on a lot of political decisions, those types of cushy senior positions are favours that are given out. They're completely above market salaries for people who couldn't get sort of the same job elsewhere. They're just a way to put money in someone's pocket. So if we could have some other lottery mechanism to sort of promote people or put them into those positions, that would reduce that ability to repay favours. So that's how you've got to be thinking when you want to tackle this. And we need to sort of bust the myths as well. We need to just be realistic about what's going on. If a vested interest or a lobby group writes a media release, we should be telling journalists, you just regurgitated a media release from a vested interest, that's not news. I mean, what do you expect them to say? Okay, but this happens every day and no one's calling it out. I don't know how to call it out, but I think we should somehow call this stuff out. The other last thing we shouldn't focus on is transparency. It's really interesting case in the US. Some states forced their hospitals. They were very worried that there was a lot of dodgy dealing going on in the health system. I know it's a little bit tangential, but you'll get my point. Typically in the US you pay, right, per service for health services, hip replacement, whatever. But you don't know how much it costs. It's very difficult to shop around. So there was certain states required hospitals to post hip replacement, what's it cost, next service, what's it cost, so people could see. Now, it was really great. They thought prices would go down. And do you know what happened? Prices went down for the listed items. Do you know what happened to the total charges that were bundled together for the medical services? They went up. Okay, because that transparency, it's just too difficult. Okay, you can have transparency till the cows come home. I can tell you there are experts on superannuation who've spent their life studying it, who know every phrase of every clause of every document, have no idea really still how it works. Okay, and we're expecting transparency to help us not get ripped off because we have to pay superannuation, or transparency help us make these decisions in the marketplace. So political transparency, let's declare more donors. I mean, it's pretty obvious who the donors are. They're pretty regular. They're pretty much the same donors every year. There was enough transparency for me to write a book. So if we have enough transparency for 2 books, what's exactly going to change? Right? Okay, what we really need to be doing is, we need to know what we want. Okay, it's actually quite difficult. Okay, we need to know what we want. Okay, and the way I look at it in the book is we go around the economy and we look at industry by industry basis and go, what's the world's best practice here? Well, that's what we want. Let's compare where we are now to there and what it costs us because of the vested interests who benefit from it. Okay, so we need to get together. We need to decide what we want if we want to change things. I think, people are always going to behave badly. I don't think we should say what we want is for people to do the right thing. I mean, that's ridiculous. Okay? If you never want to achieve what you want, then choose that. Okay? If you want politicians to have less power to give away billions of dollars of favours to their mates each year and share a fair proportion of that with the rest of us, maybe that's what you should aim for. And then you can work backwards from there about how to do that. As community groups, it's a good idea to professionalise, find and reward your allies. In many ways, the trick to beating the game of mates is to have a different game of mates. No one's going to beat a coordinated machine like the major political parties unless they are a pretty coordinated machine themselves. Okay, I know we like to think that, if only all the right people get together. No, you actually have to toe the line, you have to be loyal. If you already know what you want, then at least you can all push in that same direction in a coordinated way. Okay, so it requires a lot of coordination by other groups to stop those groups. So groups change from external pressure, which is why I say form other groups. Okay, and do your best not to splinter, and because that was my first point of decide what you want, right? So you're all pushing in the same direction. One last thing before I finish. Don't assume that facts change minds, I have written here. Don't assume you are right. Okay, that's pretty big things not to assume. We're in a battle of stories. Who's got the best story about where we should go as a society, or what we should do, or how we should share the wealth? Okay, we're in a battle of stories. I'm an economist. I write technical reports for a living, and no one understands them. Typically, I have really smart people read it and go, what's the story? And then they write the story, put it in the front, and someone reads the first page, and everything I've written is never read. Because that's what we do. And telling ourselves the same story helps groups coordinate and stay on the same page. It helps us to spread our message to other people and get them on the same page. So don't get caught up saying, something's worth $5 million, or so-and-so did this. Tell the story that you want, and everyone push to that direction. So I don't know what else I was going to say today. Hopefully the CCC, to circle back, is following a lot of what I've said. I have spoken to Alan McSpawn many times, and he assures me he has a master plan for cleaning out the corruption. But what I told them is actually what they're doing is really missing the point. Okay? They're very focused on election laws and donations, and I said, well, if I had $1 billion to give away to my favoured landowners each year in my council, wouldn't people try and get a share of that, whether they can donate or not? How about you just turn that $1 billion of favours into 100,000 or 1 million? It'll be much less attractive. I'll be a much less attractive target. Pardon me. So at least I've got them thinking about, well, what sort of rules and institutional changes should we make? Now, all this is possible. The ACT's had this system for 50 years. As I said, Parramatta Council just started the system. They're charging 50% from the gains from council planning decisions to the landowners. So you're not giving away a freebie, you're giving away half a freebie. Okay? That allows them to reduce rates on other people, okay, and share that gain with the community rather than giving it to one selected person. So it's possible to get these changes. We just need to know what we want and push for it. And even bad people will make these changes when there's enough pressure from others around them. Okay, so it's not so much relying on this hero person. We're relying on a big coordinated group to push in the same direction so that people who can make the changes are essentially forced into a corner and adopt them, whether they're in your political party or whether they're your opposition. That's how change happens. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so that's all I wanted to say. I have some books, they're $20. I don't have any change. I assume you all like cash more than I do. We can have a few minutes, but then we can get William on. We might just start the two back here.